Okay, so let's get into fields of mud, the alluvial soils of drying climates. And it's here where so much discussion about the beginning of history, the beginning of civilization, in traditional accounts that we will have all absorbed more or less. This is where it begins, in Mesopotamia, in Southwest Asia, in the region of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which certainly in like the 3rd or 4th millennium BC apparently were a little bit more moist than they are today, a little bit more swampland, but with these big rivers that would flood and spill fertile mud all over the surrounding plains. And it was in that the mud of these flooding rivers that civilization, let's call it, emerged, or a particular set of civilizations emerged in around about the 4th millennium BC, so about 3000 plus BC. It used the mud of the rivers to make enormous cities with monumental architecture, and it established a particular form of agriculture using the mud of these rivers, planting grains in and irrigating them, and establishing really a form of mass production of grains that would support a sophisticated and structured elite. But as Fernandez Amisto says, this is a particular choice of agriculture that was being made in this Sumerian or Akkadian civilization, the civilization of a number of cities that we'll talk about. And he says it's important, and this goes to the whole question of cradles of civilization. So civilization did not originate, in quote marks, on alluvial soils, though they may have helped it along. Neither did agriculture. But this time, because the thing is, agriculture also developed even earlier in Papua New Guinea, I believe maybe Peru as well, and a few other places as well. But this type of environment did breed a particular kind of agriculture, which in turn fed a particular kind of civilization, a form of agrarian mass production specializing in one or two staple grains, cutting the land with flood channels and irrigation canals, scoring the landscape and smothering it with crops which were unnatural in the sense that they could not have evolved and could not survive without humans. This was a kind of agriculture which represented an extreme form of civilizing urge. It supported teeming, urbanized, highly regulated societies, human hives, the tyranny of collective objectives. This form of agriculture had a somewhat vexed relationship with the environment around it. It was always a little bit of a fragile environment, this part of Southwest Asia, and that's part of the story from Cunliffe about why agriculture spreads out from the southwest core. It's because of some of the environmental degradation from the agriculture that leads people to go off and look for better climates and better environments, microniches. But it was also a type of society, type of civilization that consumed enormous resources, which it actually drew from surrounding cultures, or let's call them civilizations, on the steppe and on the Iranian plateau and other areas. So it was very much not a self-sufficient civilization or the dominating resource center of the entire of Eurasia. It was a particular kind of resource-consuming civilization state that emerged in this area, but already back in that 3rd, 4th millennium BC was had all sorts of trading and other sort of relationships with the steppe and other parts of Eurasia. But this Sumerian, Sumerian, Sumerian civilization did evolve and left some utterly stunning pieces of cultural heritage, I guess, over the period roughly from 3000 to 1500 BC. This Sumerian civilization sort of went through various waves of centralizing dynastic states and then a bit of a break-up into smaller, more anarchic circumstances. And there were power, I guess, moved from one key city to another, whether that was Sumer or Ur, or Akkad. And different dynasties and different periods of the time are known after those cities. Might be, as in the city certainly all those three cities, Sumer, Akkad, Susa maybe, also would be very familiar to any player of Civilization because they do appear. But also has a enduring cultural reference as the sort of like a beginning, like you say, the text, or is the beginning text, and in that sense has become almost like a symbol, the cradle of civilization itself. This civilization built enormous kind of pyramid-type structures called ziggurats, which were sort of like pyramids but more like steps. And even I think it's in the 2000 BC era, under the Akkadian dynasty, it's also where Persian carpets or woven carpets from this area are first referenced in documents. Babylon was also a city in this area, and in the early period it was by legend, was the place where the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were, but Fernandez Semesto thinks that it's quite likely that Hanging Gardens of Babylon was a kind of second millennium BC fake news perpetrated by subsequent writers, because there is apparently no evidence that it ever existed. King Hammurabi, who reigned around about 1765 BC, is famous as writing the first known code of laws, and also from the Sumerian civilization, which largely wrote with a kind of form of little triangle sort of shapes in clay tablets known as cuneiform. But from this civilization comes one of the earliest literary texts that we have, and that is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which in some ways has been seen to prefigure to some degree the story of the flood in the Bible, and because the area around the Tigris and Euphrates flooded quite a lot, and also is a bit of a foundation of heroic epics. It features a king called Gilgamesh who meets a wild man called Enkidu, who has been created by the gods to stop the king oppressing the people of his city. But Enkidu and Gilgamesh sort of have a test of strength, which Gilgamesh wins, and they end up going on a bit of a road trip to the cedar forest of kind of Lebanon, I think, where Enkidu sort of defies the gods, kills the bull of heaven, and is then sentenced to death. And in grief at the death of his friend, Gilgamesh then goes on a long journey to try to discover the secret of eternal life. Ultimately, he comes back to the city having learned that, and this is broadly what is said in the poem, in a translation, I guess it's a poem, an epic poem. Life which you look for, you will never find. For when the gods created man, they let death be his share, and life withheld in their own hands. In other words, you had to embrace mortality. It's important to say about Sumer, and we'll come to this a little bit more in the next episode where we talk about the broad things, that it, as Fernando Zemesto stressed, is not the only path to agriculture, and nor is agriculture diffused from this centre. Agriculture emerges rather from a process, I think anthropologists sort of these days call processual change, which is sort of like there's a basic process involved. It's a bit like natural selection, I guess. There's a process involved in looking out and consuming plants that leads people ultimately to this thing. And the path to agriculture is much more gradual and differently understood these days than perhaps when Sid Meier invented civilization. But it is worth noting that this civilization of Sumer and the Akkadian civilization, etc., had enormous appetite for commodities and resources, which it drew from the steppe and the surrounding mountainous districts, the sort of mining areas that Barry Cunliffe talks about, which I think I mentioned in the first show of this series on civilizations. And its internal conflicts, its constant war, etc., made it what Barry Cunliffe describes as a rabid consumer of commodities produced elsewhere. There's in fact a cuneiform text surviving from 1800 BC that describes the arrival of a single shipment of 20 tons of copper. But this heavy reliance on an international network of trade and resource extraction from other places really collapses with internal strife as well around about 1600 BC. And then there's a long sort of Sumerian dark ages before a second Babylonian empire sort of emerges, as well as a whole lot of others like Hittites and others that you might have read about over time. And from this period then, Barry Cunliffe says it's when we start to have the first clashes between nomads and empires as they are in conflict over the systems of Eurasia. It's also, in Fernando Zemesto's view, very much an example of how great ambition can reshape the environment, but perhaps cannot always last.